Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Visionary New Earth Leaders. Today, I have a very, very interesting guest with me, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. And Kenny was somebody I found on the internet, and straight away, I was like, right, I want to talk to him. And so I'm gonna let you introduce yourself actually, because you have so many things to share and you were the best one to introduce yourself. So over to
Well,
you.
thank you for that. I appreciate the kind words. I do quite a few things. I'm an author, speaker, content creator. I'm a life coach. I've created some processes. Um, One of them is emotional mastery, which you can think of as the next step after emotional intelligence. It goes deeper and it's based on neuroscience too. Emotional intelligence is based on science that's no longer valid. And I discovered something called the worst day cycle. If you're familiar with repetition compulsion, it's a process the Freud delved into and others, but it's really been left alone. And as I did all the research and everything, um, I figured out some pieces I hadn't found in the literature, and so I can show you can put anyone in front of me, whether you think they're successful or not successful, and in a couple of questions, I can show how every single one of us is repeating our childhood trauma. That's all life is, and we have a vast undereducation when it comes to trauma, and how easily we all experience it. And if your life isn't working, I can show you very quickly where it started. But more importantly, I got into this business because my life was a mess. And I spent decades trying to get help. And I ran into one specific, mentor, teacher, counselor who helped me a lot, but I could never get over the hump. And I had to find some things that I just didn't see out there. And one of them is that really frustrated me is people will use what I call buzzwords, but they don't tell you how. And so, at least if you look at my content and my reviews, from clients, they kind of call me the how guy. So if somebody's struggling with something, I have 1,000 different, this is what you do. It's not just the why and the what. It's also the missing piece was, well, here's the process. And that's really my specialty is, here's the process out of it, regardless of what you're struggling with. If you've been with narcissists or career problems or financial problems, whatever it may be, very quickly I can show you where it's coming from. But more importantly, here's how you turn it around if you want to turn it around.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, what really stood out to me when I saw your content is so I'm a healer as well, and I've been healing a lot of trauma myself and for my clients. And I have a lot of my friends are like online entrepreneurs and friends have been going through healing their own narcissistic abuse and things like that. So some of your videos was about narcissism, and I'm kind of just diving into different teachers' sort of viewpoints of this topic. And not necessarily we talk about narcissism today, but my own sort of impression of the world right now is that we are racing in consciousness, and all these unhealed patterns and traumas are now becoming really visible, and also for the people who doesn't really understand it, they like, this is not right, this is something, not, it's not me now, this is something is going on here. And I think this awareness is so important, and actually the education, I absolutely love this education. So tell me more about how you actually got
Sure.
started, because you said my life was a mess. So I
Yeah.
always like to start at the beginning, just to give the viewers a little bit of another idea of, yeah, where you
Yeah.
started and how you got to where you are now.
I'll try and give the condensed version. My
Yeah.
parents were 16 and 18 when they got married, and they had four kids by 21 and 23. So, they were children raising children. And um, my father was beat to death as a child. He never, did that to us, but, he was pretty angry. he was pretty shut down and walled off and unreachable when he was younger. And then my mother became an alcoholic. And so my life really changed. I tell a story in my book of, I was 10, 11 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night just to use the bathroom, and I opened the door and find my mom passed out naked on the toilet. That's when I discovered she was an alcoholic. And because our society still struggles with being open and honest about our childhoods and the things we go through, and parents just sweep things under the rugs, and, and especially back then, my parents couldn't help themselves, so they couldn't help me. And children become the emotional condition of their parents. So from there, I became, I struggled with multiple addictions. I married, well, I married two narcissists. The first was a borderline narcissistic sociopath who was both physically and verbally abusive. Went through a horrific child custody battle, went bankrupt fighting for my kids, lost, and played two professional sports I see now I never wanted to play. Married a second narcissist, and then spent 3 days holed up in my apartment contemplating suicide, trying to write my kids a note. And it was easy to write to them about how much pain I was in. But when it came to trying to describe why this was the best for everybody, because of my childhood, and I just had an innate, I guess, desire to try and figure things out since I was I think I saw my first counselor at 21 or 22. I had been working on myself for decades. And so every sentence I wrote, I'm like, well, that's transference, that's manipulative, that's codependent. Like, I couldn't outshrink myself. And I realized I'm in real trouble here, because while I can't live, I can't die, and I can't live with dying and dumping all of that on them. And so I was like, what am I going to do now? And that's when I got up and I went into my office and I wrote down, I want to come up with a new process that nobody's ever discussed that'll fundamentally change the counseling, coaching, healing process. Because here I am 30 years into working on myself, and I can't get over the hump. And something is drastically wrong in this industry. And that's when my life changed. It really, although I'd been working a lot of things, made a lot of progress, there was one piece that I had never been willing to let go of. And when you grow up in that kind of chaotic environment, at least we all create our own adaptations. My skill set was that I got from both my mother and father. I can walk in a room and read people. I know what's going to happen before it happens. I'm created where I constantly paid attention. I was very hyper vigilant, paid attention to everything. So I learned to categorize and define things and understand little subtleties in people and situations. Well, when you live your life that way, you think you're protecting yourself, but then you live your life out front. And so you're always trying to get ahead of it. Well, in the process of trying to control all of that, you create your own problems. And so I had to learn how to let that go. And, I have a chapter in my book of how to let it come. I learned that process, and that's when things changed for me. And then, that's when my recovery process changed. I started doing research on the brain, the neuroscience of it, trauma, what happens. And I'm like, it's right here. Like, I had an instinct, first of all, that everything's emotional, like everyone's teaching, change your thoughts. It's a complete waste of time. Every thought starts with an emotion. Whatever you're doing, it's emotions first. But not nobody, very few people teach that. Mm-hmm. And so, I had all these instincts. And then when I did all the research, I'm like, oh my God, it's right here. Why isn't anyone talking about it? Like, you mentioned narcissist. You don't end up with a narcissist unless there's an issue inside of you. And
that's right.
It's all of these different things. And that's when I discovered all these processes. And I'm sure there are other people out there that know it, and I just haven't met them. But I sure don't see it in, on YouTube and, I see little pockets or little pieces, but I'd never, really seen somebody put it all together. And so when I did all, I was like, wow, why hasn't anyone ever put this together? And so that's,
So
how
let's
I
talk
got
about
into it.
the thought and emotion,
Sure.
because I speak about both. So to my clients, I speak about harnessing the mind and, also feeling the emotions, etc. But let's just make it a little bit more specific, maybe. So from
Sure.
your perspective, share what you then discovered in
Oh, like
the process.
right now, this is why so many people think their thoughts run their life. Is right now you're aware of whatever thoughts you're having.
Mm,
But what's out of your awareness is the feel of your legs and rear end in your chair, your elbows on the table, the temperature of the room. And so all of those, your senses are gathering data. It comes into the right hemisphere of the brain. And when it comes into there, the first thing it does is it goes right back to your earliest childhood experiences and experiences since then. It's looking for the emotional, what is the emotional equivalent of what I'm sensing in my world right now? So as you hear anyone listening to me talk, all of this information is going to the right side of your brain, and it's looking for summaries, categories, and definitions of past experiences, almost all from your childhood. Now we're not consciously aware of this process. And so all of that happens, then it sends it over to your left side of the brain where we're supposed to be logical and everything. But there's a great book. If you're a person who believes in thought, I highly encourage you to read The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. He did a macro study of all the latest neuroscience. And as he describes it, the left hemisphere is a denial monster. When you show it, and think of politics, think of everything that's going on. You literally show somebody the proof and they double down and, stay entrenched in their position. And then this is what happens in the narcissist dynamic. Then they flip it and now make you, they play the victim. That's what our left hemisphere does, our so-called logical side. What it's supposed to do is send it back to the right to get a full, complete picture of things, which our greatest intellect is always based on our emotions and what we're feeling, not our thoughts. Well, we don't know that. So, I'm writing my next book and I use an example of I went downstairs to get a cup of coffee and I was trying to describe some of this and I just realized, oh, wait a minute. I just grabbed the coffee. The cup's warm. I can feel the coolness on the tile. As I turn the corner, car drives by, blows its horn. I walk up the stairs, feel the coolness of the carpet, sit down. What most people don't realize is, well, my older brother, my dad, when I was in trouble, he had a booming voice. My older brother, when I was asleep, he'd scream in my ear to wake me up. Loud noises freak me out. So what people don't know is that loud car that just went by and honked its horn triggered trauma from my childhood. So when I sit down at my computer, that's going to influence my thoughts and what I type out. Well, people are we're so detached emotionally. I mean, studies show 70% of the population doesn't even feel. And so that's why people think they're run by their thoughts, because we are so undereducated and underdeveloped emotionally. But it's not even how our brain and body works. The neuroscience, they show it through MRI studies. Every thought previous to a thought were triggered from our emotional centers. And so it just takes, but that left hemisphere will go, no, 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 we'll fight. And it'll double down.
I have a sub question there on hanging on to that. So when you were talking about the politicians, so you're presenting something and then to me, the words you were saying, it's like they're dismissing or they are rejecting or sort of like resisting whatever has been said, and then they flip it around and ignoring it. Is this a trauma response?
Well, look, it's my life experience. Every single one of us is traumatized.
Yeah.
Like, think of how absurd
but
it
is it? Or is it the ego?
Well, I mean, some of it's a skill. Like the choosing to be a politician is choosing a life of self-deception and denial. That's your job description.
Yeah, I love
So,
that. That's a good description.
and so is that trauma? Like, I think there's your answer is I'm going to make a life choice to not live in the present in reality. And I'm going to take whatever you say and spin it for my own benefit.
Yeah,
I,
and I'm going to
yeah,
manipulate
that's
the
trauma.
situation. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Every career, like I write about my first book, your career tells me about your childhood trauma. Like if you're in sales, that tells me you were told directly or indirectly you have no worth. Because what's the process of sales? I could sell $1 billion today, but where do I start tomorrow? Zero, no worth. So on in real estate, they either moved a lot or had pure chaos in the home. Because what's the process of buying and selling homes? Pure chaos. They're just reliving their trauma against themselves. Or, even my ghostwriter that I use, she's like, well, what about me? And I was like, you really want to know? And I said, well, think of it. What's your job? She's like, well, I write people's stories. Yes. So why would somebody write somebody else's story? Because they were never allowed to live their own story. And
Yeah,
so when
definitely.
you learn about the worst day cycle, which I talk about every single thing in your life, I go to a dinner party, someone says a sentence, you just told me everything about your childhood. When you learn about this, it's very simple to just go, oh, okay, thanks. Now I know you.
That's
It's
so interesting. So,
yeah.
so do it for me then.
I
I'm not
I
putting you on the
hesitate.
spot. I'm just
What's that?
curious. I'm just curious.
Well, what is it? What is it you get from helping people?
So this is I just feel like I'm living my purpose literally when I help people. It feels like I'm
That's not a feeling, that's a description.
okay. I feel elated when they I feel like elated, excited, and sort of like uplifted when they perform better or succeed or transform or whatever the word you want to use. I
Okay.
literally get a buzz when they get a result.
So, how does that tie in? Who did you have to perform for? Who did you have to take care of? How were you made? How were you unable to be recognized as a child? It's
Yeah.
like all we're doing is satisfying.
No, 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 it's fine. So my mum was an alcoholic. So I was the one, look, she took care of me, but
You were the mother.
yeah, emotionally, I suppose, yeah.
Exactly.
Father was very close to me, but physically distant because we didn't live together. And that's kind of in a nutshell. And he was, I talk about this also very openly.
Yeah.
He was an artist, grandiose, like really, big visions about things, how he wanted to live, like almost like in a fantasy. But he always failed, like financially. But very kind, soft, gentle man.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
it. That's kind of in a nutshell.
yeah. So when someone grows up with two parents who don't notice them and don't validate them, now do you see the payoff you get from your career?
Yes.
And that doesn't make it bad. Like I talk about, the goal in recovery is one, to accept that we're all broken and damaged. We're all
Mm.
perfectly perfect. That doesn't make us bad. The difficulty is because we don't teach about these things. What almost all of us do is we use that trauma to re-victimize ourselves.
Mm.
Use it against ourselves. So the process is one, getting into reality and truth. Oh my gosh, I'm reliving my childhood. We need to grieve that, get present to that. And then it's a discovery journey of, okay, how am I reliving it against myself? Well, that's devastating because we realize I'm a fraud. Oh my God, I picked these narcissists. That tells you about me, not them.
Mm. Mm.
That's a direct reflection of my childhood and the
Of
things I've
course.
done. I'm not letting them off the hook. Their
Mhm.
own childhood created that. They're responsible for that. I'm many people will call me victim blaming, but that's because they're so early in the recovery journey. they're in so much self-deception and denial and detached from truth of their childhood, they're not ready to see the part that they play in it yet. And neither was I. I mean, that's just part of the recovery journey.
It's part of the journey, yeah.
Yeah, if you get further along, you're like, oh my God. It doesn't condone them, it doesn't let them off the hook. They still need to be held, the consequences for that. But so do I. I need to, if I don't confront myself, then you'll just end up with another one. So yeah, so the key is once we discover all of that, then we can start figuring out, because every trauma is a gift. Remember my hypervigilance. Well, I just learned to flip it. And now, like, I'm the way you described the elation you get, I don't, because it's not about me. They do the work. Like, I put out this content, but whether they read it or watch it has nothing to do with me. And so my self-esteem and my value doesn't come from whether they improve or not. No one can validate me that way. I do that within myself. Plus, what I had to learn about, taking on this role is my need for them to do better means I need more work. Do you see, I'm taking.
No, I know what you're saying. The thing is here, this is a part, I suppose this is a part of the coaching journey. So
yeah,
in the beginning of the coaching journey, I'm just sharing here, there was an attachment from my side to them to do well. It's not anymore. It feels like a bonus. It feels like a icing on the cake now. Like if we work one-on-one and they do better and it's great, I'm like, yes, let's celebrate. That's where I get to kick off. For the ones that don't show up, even if they paid me, I'm totally like, it's okay. It's your journey. So that piece was so that piece was so important personally for me, just as a mentor or coaching others. But
and even if a coach gets tied into the outcome, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be coaching, because
no, it's just the journey.
Yeah, well, and look, I'm too much for most people. If you're early in the journey, I am way too much. You're not ready to confront yourself. I'm the person people come to after therapists, after counselors, after psychologists and psychiatrists. Like, I'm the last step. That's what I saw, was nobody's teaching that. And that's what I realized, that's my gift. Well, that doesn't make me better, because I can't do, Tony Robbins is a perfect example. You and I wouldn't have jobs without him. Now, a lot of people don't like him, say he's a master marketer, which he is. But this whole space is because of him. He is brilliant at the beginning. His whole program, you go to his events, and all he's doing is triggering adrenaline and getting people excited and liking them. The problem is 72 hours later, they crash because it's just a hype event. But it opens the door.
It opens the door.
They wake up and realize, wow, this isn't working. I need to go somewhere else. But I would never have a client if it weren't for Tony. I love him. I think what he's done is brilliant. And
I love Tony Robbins. I have actually not gone to one of his events, but I just know he's like igniting. He's very igniting.
Wonderful. And I can't do that. That's not my skill set.
But that's not a part of your soul journey, probably. That's, you've got your own sort of journey. So yeah, totally. But I'm so interested in this thing, because when you so I would then argue to say, okay, so I came in, to this lifetime, obviously I believe in past lives and all the reincarnations and everything. So I would say, well, I'll come into this life, I'm going to do better, or like I'm going to advance on this, I'm going to learn these things now. So of course I set up it in this way with my mum and dad. There is that soul journey that I'm also talking about as well. So of course everything is like not sort of planned out, but it's like there is a cause and effect of everything. It's meant to be in a specific order. And so that's what really resonated with me when you said that, because of course on a higher perspective, my soul would have come in and say, okay, well, if you were going to like activate other leaders and like into their higher consciousness and doing these things and really have that sort of place in this world, you need to go through a few things before you can do it.
I liken the recovery process. Have you ever watched a 3D movie without the glasses?
No, I haven't actually.
Well, you can probably go on YouTube or something and see it. And what you'll see is the colors are distorted, the picture is distorted,
Yeah.
everything's kind of out of place. But we've all had the life experience of watching a movie. So even with all the distortion, we can kind of piece together what's working, but it's not clear. Well, that's the life journey, and you know how the worst day cycle works is what people don't know until they get really far in recovery is every single life choice we ever make, all we are ever doing is reliving our trauma against ourselves, screaming back at ourselves the 4 stages: trauma, fear, shame, and denial. The trauma we've experienced, how that triggered fear. I don't have time to get into all the details, but
Sure.
we're literally, when we pick this narcissist, when we pick this career, when we, whatever it is, we're literally making that choice to show us all the things we need to go back and heal from our childhood and ultimately forgive ourselves, but we can't see it. It's distorted.
Yes, like the film.
Why is that? Because we don't have the glasses. Well, I discovered the glasses. So when you work through the process you're like, oh my God, well, now I know why I picked you. And now I know why this. And so I personally don't know anything about past lives or anything like that. So I can't speak to any of that. It hasn't become an awareness of mine, which, could be that I haven't developed enough to see any of that. I can't speak to that, but what I'm tying into is, you kind of laid out lives as that process. And so where I can join you on that is, it's yes, in my life experience, at least in, the lives we live now, that's how everyone's living their life. They don't have to, but we've never taught. It's the only process we know. Look, the first book on psychology wasn't written until the 1870s. Then you have Freud and Jung and some others in the early 1920s. But it really wasn't until the 1970s with the likes of Phil Donahue and Oprah, the TV talk show showed up, where we actually started talking about families, relationships, emotions, any of this stuff. Think of that.
Yeah.
We're 50 years into openly investigating emotions and all of this stuff. The equivalent of that is, as a species, we literally have not even discovered fire or how to build tools, that the earth is round, not flat. We are so undereducated and underdeveloped emotionally, and yet emotions run everything we do.
Yes.
So there's so much we don't know.
Yeah, it's like infancy stage at the moment. It is really.
Yeah. Well, and here's the proof of it. Every single TV commercial, sitcom, movie, they're all designed between people with an emotional competence between about 3rd, 4th, and 7th grade. That's a reflection on us. All right.
But it's
that's
like
what
it's
we all are.
meeting them it's like meeting them where they're at.
Exactly.
So so what I'm getting when I'm speaking to you here is very much about, when you said emotional mastery, that really, it's not just emotional intelligence, it's like emotional mastery. And I always say, like, the universe is a feeling universe, like it is an emotional universe. We're here, we're equipped with these things. So before we're not going to finish just yet, but before we finish, could you, because anyone who's listening here, it could be an entrepreneur, coach. Some of my listeners are perhaps spiritually awakening people as well. But could you give like a step 1, 2, 3, because you were the how person, of how to get started? Because there's so many different options. Some people come to me, some people will go and discover more about life coaching or Tony Robbins. What would you say? What is
3 simple questions. Start with, what am I feeling? Well, remember, most people don't know what they're feeling. So
that's right.
I offer a free feelings wheel on my website. If you go to my website under resources, it says free feelings wheel. You download that and it walks you through the exact process. But the first step is, what am I feeling? Well, the feelings wheel starts with sad, angry, just base feelings, happy, right? Well, that's where most of us are. That's the depth to our emotional intelligence or emotional understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional mastery. Emotional intelligence is based off the premise that the brain, it's the old triune brain model, that we have 3 sections and the amygdala runs emotions and all. It's not even true. The brain, every aspect of your brain is involved in emotion and thinking. Like we now know the brain isn't designed that way, that none of that's true. And so their model is based on what we used to believe about the brain structure. And emotional mastery is, about, the latest science of how it actually works. So what we don't have is emotional specificity or granularity. So we may know our base emotion, but what we're needing is to get more depth. So the first question is, what am I feeling? Most people will start in that. Then ask yourself, where in my body do I feel it?
Mm.
Then the third question is, what's my first memory of this feeling? Well, what most people will do is they'll remember something the last 1 to 5 years. Great, write it down. Then ask yourself, what's before that? Write that down. Just keep going back. Eventually you land at 4, 6 years old, whatever it may be. Mom was drunk, dad was painting. I mean, for me, a big one is stupid. And so, the memory that always pops up is asking my dad for help with homework. And he was an engineer. And once math got into theory, I freaked out. And he just looked at me and go, he never said I was stupid. But he goes, Kenny, don't you see it? It's like right here. And so that base field, there it is. So there's your original wounding. And now you've just seen your worst day cycle and how you're repeating it throughout your life. Now, behind stupid, insignificant, invisible, rejected. This is the specificity and granularity that we don't need. Now, each one of those, do you see how, as I said those words, you probably had different memories?
Yeah.
Different
You've
instances.
really got to be present and really feel into the words so that you can be specific. I love how you say this because it's exactly how I do in divine healing. So when we go back and track things back, is the feeling, where is it in the body, what memory is triggered? This is actually the process I'm using. So I love that. Like, I am agreeing. Do you know what I mean? I'm in agreement, Kenny. So
in the emotional mastery process, this is where it'll be cognitive behavioral therapy falls short. Is, for instance, let's say you're afraid of spiders. Cognitive behavioral therapy will teach you to use self-deception and denial. It'll try and it'll give you a look, I'm not afraid of spiders. Spiders are harmless. Well, that's not how I feel. I don't feel that they're harmless. Well, emotional mastery, specificity, and granularity would be, I am absolutely terrified of this spider, the hairy legs, the way its legs tap the ground sends chills up my spine, the hair on the back of my leg. See, do you see how all of the emotions, like you get more and more specific, and then you open yourself to a new simulation category and definition. At the end, it's, I'm open to the possibility that there might be some value in learning more about spiders. See, I'm not going to suppress, like CBT will get you to do. I'm not going to suppress it. I'm not going to deny it. I'm going to go right into it and gain as much specificity and experience as much emotion as possible. And then I'm going to open myself up to creating a new way to define spiders or my mom's alcoholism or whatever it was. Because there's always, now that I'm adult, I can also look back and go, well, my mom was adopted. My dad wasn't emotionally present. My mom never got the opportunity of this. Well, it's not okay that my mom drank. My mom was destroying herself, me. I no longer have to carry that shame and rejection.
Exactly.
That's actually my mom's self-rejection. So now I have a new definition of that moment. And so even if it's you just broke up with a narcissist, you're thinking it's an attack against you. When you use this process, all of a sudden now you have a separation. Now you have a new definition of how
Mm.
the world works, all these different things. So
Exactly.
there's much more involved in it,
Of
but
course, the words that come into, it's radical responsibility that comes into my mind when you talk, because we can always project and say, well, that was her fault, or I'm in this because of that. You know what I mean? So,
I teach the worst day cycle is trauma, fear, shame, and denial. The antithesis, the recovery, the best day cycle, what
mm,
I teach is truth,
mm,
responsibility, healing, and forgiveness.
absolutely. I
And
love
the,
that
the
so much.
single greatest killer on the planet today that nobody's talking about other than myself is self-deception and denial. Every single process I have, that's if you want to heal somebody, you need to be an expert in teaching them how to see they are deceiving themselves and they are in overwhelming denial.
Mm,
And that's the epidemic. I mean, now we know the masks never worked. We knew it back then. It was so obvious. And again, the left side, everyone's doubling down on masks. And,
mm,
it's like, if you can't get to truth first. And so there's a process to learn
mm,
how to face your self-deception and denial. And that's really, no matter what my client we're working on,
mm.
that's what I'm always helping them learn how to get into truth because we don't know how. I mean,
Yeah.
studies show even the most adjusted person, we lie to ourselves 10 to 200 times a day. We are in I mean, just think about it. Oh, I don't need to go to the gym today. I can skip it. Oh, this one extra cookie. Boom, 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 boom.
Mm. So
We're just so
self-denial.
detached. Yeah.
Self-denial. Um, I love that. Like self-denial is like I
It's
think.
everything. Self-deception. My whole program is all that's what, if I've created a niche, it's about that. And if a person doesn't know how to confront their self-deception, that's why your life is the way it is.
Well, it's almost like when the alcoholic decides to go to do the 12-step process, like, I have been in denial. Now I'm seeing the truth. I'm going to start this journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing can happen before that anyway.
Yeah. And
Well,
so
there is no room for it because if they're still in denial, then it's not working.
and it's, I get a lot of pushback on my narcissism stuff because, that's where most people that teach about narcissism celebrate the victim. And that is the most crippling thing you can ever do. Well, it's
I so
true.
agree with you.
Yeah, we were victimized, but we chose it. And we
Yes.
did the work. And what you see, like what I talk about, the person attracted to a narcissist is a severely disempowered codependent with incredibly high levels of shame and low self-esteem. And they manipulate and control just like the narcissist, but from the disempowered victim position.
Yes.
And they're in complete deception. And this is what we do. We celebrate victims. Look at all the payoffs we get from being a victim in society. We get our own special group. We get government help. We get attention. We get power because now everyone else is, oh my God, you poor thing. So now I've got you more invested in fixing the problem than myself. I get to stay the child. Like there are all of these benefits to being the victim of whatever it may be. And until we can face our self-deception and denial and realize, yeah, that I played a part in this. It doesn't condone them. It doesn't
No, it's the
them.
responsibility again, looking at yourself, in the mirror, really. I have a friend who goes to Coda, and she was like, oh my God, this is just unraveling, how, where, I don't know exactly where and how often, but, she will relay the insights, and I'm like, oh my God, that is so interesting. Do you know what I mean? So absolutely. There is a few people online I've seen and they celebrate the victim. I just don't agree. Intuitively, I just like,
Great place to start though, because when somebody's so in the original
could be a good
wound,
way to start, but then you've got to move.
they just like we talked about with healers, we need that. But eventually, if they truly want to recover, they'll kind of go, something's missing here.
Yeah.
And then they
It's
run
a good
across more
start.
stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a good start. It
Because
doesn't,
originally, yeah.
yeah, we don't want to demonize it because it's like, it's a good start.
Oh, yeah.
But really, perhaps they're so victimized and so in fight and flight that that's the only rescue at the time.
Yeah, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, it's a good place to start.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the other thing I want to touch on with that is because our society is so uneducated about codependence, there's this, like, it kind of frustrates me that most of my videos that explode are about narcissism, but narcissism is very small. The amount of people, what most people are doing is they're confusing what's called a falsely empowered codependent with a narcissist. And what's so tragic is the most popular people on codependence don't even know. All they ever talk about is the typical needy, people-pleasing, disempowered codependent. Well, there's the polar opposite. The most successful people on our planet, the CEOs, all the boss bitches and men and women, these are the falsely empowered codependents. Most people are not even aware of how that is. And then they become the love avoidance. And so people are, I've done videos where the difference between a codependent and a narcissist. And so most people are labeling someone as a narcissist. It's the new buzzword. But again, this is why I got into the business. It's just a buzzword. It's like,
It's
no,
a
you got to
buzzword,
get
exactly.
here.
Yeah, but it is
so
educating. It is educating.
It opens the door.
Yeah.
But, which is great. It's just, my hope is people keep digging past that, because if you don't know about a falsely empowered codependent, in my personal view, you don't know codependence. And this is incredible. And even CODA pretty much only teaches about the falsely empowered. Very important to learn. Yeah. But this side of the dynamic is the most treacherous, because the disempowered, they want help. They go to CODA. They were primarily abandoned in childhood. So they're like, I'll do anything.
To just get the help. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
The falsely empowered were enmeshed. And so they were made to take care of a parent. They were the golden child. And so the act of recovery, their greatest fear is intimacy, because with a falsely empowered, think of the umbilical cord. It's meant to feed the child. It becomes the opposite. The parent sucks the emotional life out of the child. And so they're so massively filled with shame. That's why they pursue so many external pursuits. There's always something more important than the relationship. They have what's called outside intensity, which can be gambling, sex, their career. You're seeing this, women will primarily make it their kids, their animals. They'll get sick and hurt a lot. Now they're starting to develop the male traits of work and workaholism and stuff. Women will have emotional affairs. Men tend to have sexual affairs. They'll get into gambling, hobbies, things like that. And so, that's always more important, because their greatest fear, their conscious fear, is intimacy. Because look what happened to them in childhood. And so this is why we celebrate the Stoic SEO.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
It's like, no. We're both struggling here. We're all in this together.
Yeah, we're all in this. I love all this topic. These topics, I love them so much. Before we finish now, I would love to, because I will share all the links and everything, but where can people get your free stuff to get started?
Really, the best place to start is my website. If you take advantage of it, it could take you 30 minutes to an hour. I have produced so much free content and free links to help people get started. Under the resources tab, there's 6 or 7 free downloads. There's links to all my YouTube stuff, all of that, my free introductory class to developing emotional mastery, the link for that, my coaching, my book. You can read about my mentor, Mike, and more about the story of how I ended up here. And, and there's just, my blog is there. So if you don't like to watch videos, you like to read, I've converted not most, but quite a few of the videos into the blog. But from there, that's the hub. And then you pick and choose, I want to learn more on YouTube. I want to read more. I also have a recommended reading list that to me, those books on there are essential for recovery. There are people that are experts in aspects of this recovery that say it and treat it much better than I do. And I believe we need, all of that information.
Of course.
So and it's kennyweiss.net. I mean,
lovely. I've got the link, so I will drop that below. So Okay, we're going to round up, but thank you so much for sharing all this. I am going to head over there myself because I am always open and curious to new things. And yeah, I'll see you around online. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me and giving me an opportunity to share what matters to me. So thank you.
Thank you.